Have you ever thought about traveling somewhere at home or abroad to take on a hiking holiday and you've talked yourself out of it because you didn't think you were fit enough? Well, my guest on the Global Travel Channel podcast show today will help you out. Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. It's great to be back. On the show, we talk to people from across the world about all things related to travel, from amazing adventures to inspiring stories, to the not so well-known destinations. We cover it all. You can find all of our previous podcast episodes on our Global Travel Channel website by going to www.globaltravelchannel.com. If you're an iTunes person, you can also download our episode from Apple Podcast. You can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, and a host of other platforms that you can also find on our website. The Global Travel Channel is a collaboration between travel writers, photographers, YouTubers, podcasters, and travel bloggers from across the world. We bring you information that we hope makes your next travel experience an awesome one, no matter where you decide to travel to. You can also find the Global Travel Channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So be sure to subscribe, like, and follow us there so that you can keep updated on our new content postings as and when they happen. We also now have a Patreon page. So for as little as the price of a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue to produce our podcast show. Any contributions you make on our Patreon page are greatly appreciated. Now on to today's show. I wonder if you've ever thought about planning a holiday that involves a long hike. And maybe you've thought to yourself or talked yourself out of it because you didn't think you were in shape enough to be able to do it. Maybe it was something like hiking to the Everest base camp, or the patriotic route of the Kokoda Trail, or even climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Well, on today's Global Travel Channel podcast show, my guest is Mr. Rowan Smith, and he set up a business to help people get in top shape for their upcoming trekking experiences. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Rowan Smith. Rowan, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I'm very, very excited to get into it.
Now, tell me, have you ever been on a podcast show before?
Yeah, I've been on a few here and there.
You are? Okay, so you're a pretty regular hand at this sort of stuff.
Oh, I wouldn't say regular yet, but I've been trying to get myself on a few because I love chatting away and I love being on podcasts. So yeah, been on a few so far.
Do you listen to podcasts?
I do. I listen to quite a few when I'm training myself.
Okay, what are some of the podcasts you listen to in terms of what are they about, subject matter?
A lot of the stuff I listen to at the moment, which is seeing I'm sort of small business owner trying to grow that. It's a lot of sort of entrepreneur podcasts or sort of business management podcasts and things like that. And I find it's just a really easy way to consume a little bit of content while I'm multitasking doing something else.
Fantastic. And how long have you been listening to podcasts for?
Probably, I'm still pretty fresh in the world, probably only about 7 months or so. For whatever reason, I seem to resist the idea of them for many, many years, even though so many people talked about them. But I'm definitely on the bandwagon now and absolutely loving it.
Good stuff. Well, it's really good to have you on the show. And I thought, as a bit of a warm-up, as it's your first time on my show, that I'd give you a bit of a random question out of left field to get you going, just to make you feel all comfortable and ready to go. So how about I throw that at you? My random question today is, what's your favourite snack food while you're travelling?
This is okay. So this is I don't know if it's whether my favorite thing, but it's the thing that I eat all the time when I'm traveling. And for whatever reason, I whenever I'm like, my travel tends to be just backpacking with a little backpack, just going around from city to city. And I tend to always be by myself, so I'm just tramping around cities and having a look at things or going on little hikes or whatever. And for whatever reason, I get myself in. When I'm doing this, I get myself in a bit of a weird mindset, and I sort of like don't like sitting down to have a nice meal by myself in the first couple of days of being in a city. So I always go to the supermarkets and I always end up just getting the local bread, the local cheese, and some salami, which isn't the most exciting thing in the world and does get a bit sickening. But yeah, that's probably 85% of my snacks when I'm traveling, in all honesty.
Fantastic. Well, that's different to what I've had previous on the show. I had an Aussie guy talking to me the other day about surfing in Australia, and his favourite snack food was curry pies and a cup of coffee.
Oh, that's not bad either.
There we go. Now, it's a big milestone on the show today, and I wanted to just acknowledge that with you. This is my 50th episode of the Global Travel Channel podcast show, so we've reached another milestone, and we keep on going. So thank you for being the participant number 50 with me today, and I look forward to sharing some of our funnier, lighter moments on the show with you today too, because I've got to ask you a question. I absolutely love the power of social media. Do you?
Oh, I love it as well.
You do? Well, there might be a couple of things that come up on today's show that I've got to say to you now that I'm 100% not responsible for. So you can blame that on Mr. Zuckerberg, if you like, yeah? And we'll see how you respond to that later on, but I'll hold you in suspense for that right now. Whereabouts are you talking to us from today?
Talking from the northern beaches of Sydney, Australia.
Northern beaches, now that's a nice part of the world. Have you been out surfing today?
I haven't. I've been looking, like I'm probably maybe 5 minutes drive from the beach, and I live up on the top of a plateau, and I've sort of been looking at the ocean through my window, which I'm lucky enough to have, but I've been resisting the urge because I had a whole bunch of work to do, unfortunately. So maybe tomorrow, I think, is a plan. Once I've knocked out all the stuff I need to do and can relax a little bit more tomorrow.
Very good. Now, I asked you about surfing because I have been doing my research about you, and I know a little bit about what you have got up to in your previous life. Let's start off by talking about Boy Scouts, because I've never been a Boy Scout, so I've always wondered and quite fascinated about what Scouts actually get up to. When did you start in the scouting world, and what was it for you, the scouting world?
Okay, so when did I start? It was back in primary school, so I would have been pretty young. I must have been 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. And I did it for about 4 or 5 years. And initially what got me into it was, I think when I was younger, I did love to go camping, and I loved to like be shooting around the local area, and I loved to being a little bit adventurous. But the Scouts, sort of, one of my friends had been through it, and just the stuff that they did, like going out hiking, going out on kayaking trips, all these bits and pieces just seemed like that step above adventure, and it was all there for the taking, and it was so easy to get involved. And as opposed to sort of relying on the family for if we can get holidays or not, like just jumping into them and getting involved with what they did, that was sort of the big appeal. Which I really, really loved.
How old do you have to be a scout, or to start off in scouting?
Oh, don't quote me on this, but I know you can get in super early in the Cub Scouts, like very, very, very early. And then it goes from like Cub Scouts up to Scouts, which is I think up to maybe 15 years old. And then you go to another type of Scouts, and then there's another type of Scouts, which I think goes up to 25 years old, possibly. Which I did have a mate go through all of them, and he absolutely loved it. But I sort of probably dropped out. As sad as it is, I probably dropped out when I was maybe about 16, as I was getting into high school and realised that maybe, unfortunately, scouting wasn't quite as cool as it could be seen, and that was not for any reason that I wasn't enjoying myself, but you know how teenagers are, and they get swept up in everything. So that was the end of my scouting career, unfortunately.
What would you say scouting gave you the most in terms of takeaways from that experience?
I think just being, like, their big motto is be prepared. Like, that's literally what they have, like, plastered everywhere. And just the sense of being prepared for something, but not being over prepared. So, you know, with our family adventures, we'd often, you know, go camping. So that was absolutely amazing. We pack up the car with every sort of thing we needed, move down and, you know, do the standard car camping. But with them, it was like, you know what, if you want to go out on a weekend adventure, just throw together the essentials in a backpack, you know, first aid kit, your food, your water, yada, 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 and then just hit the trail. And I think that's something that really stuck with me over the years as I've sort of got into my own hiking and then got into my own, you know, backpacking around the world, and just been able to be more or less sustained in a good way, but with the sort of minimal amount of gear that you had to lug around. So I think that's probably one of the big things I took from them.
Now, that's a good segue into introducing what we're going to be talking about today, because you use the words being prepared. and essentially you're a guy that believes that trekking isn't a walk in the park, it's a challenge worth taking seriously. And when people go off traveling around the world and they're taking on these, what you call bucket list adventures, there's a right way and perhaps a wrong way of doing these things. So I'd like you to tell my audience today about how your passion and career collided one day, and tell us about that actual day. When was that realization to you that you could do what you love doing and actually turn it into a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you said, I was maybe about 3 years ago, I was sort of had the luck of having both my sort of passion and my career collide. So in the sense that, as I said, like, I grew up loving adventure through scouts, through surfing, through all of that, and just charging around, finding new things to sort of get me excited about the world. And then on top of that was my other sort of passion for sports performance. So, I was tried to be a athlete, a sprinter back in the day, which unfortunately I failed out of. And then, as many things, when you can't do it, you tend to teach it. So that's when sort of I became a coach. So I started teaching athletics. Then I got my qualifications working in a gym. Then I went to university for sport and exercise science. And sort of ever since I was probably 16, I was been coaching or training in one way or another. And then about 3 years ago, I'd sort of just come back into Australia after being overseas for a few years, working as a PT and just traveling around country to country. And I was lucky enough to get a job in an altitude gym. So if you haven't heard one of these things, they're just basically like simulated altitude gyms where they try to basically simulate the effects of high altitude to help prepare people who are going up to altitude. That's a very, very complex subject, which we probably won't dive into today, but whether it works or not is another story. But it was a really, really great place to sort of get exposed to lots of people coming in, wanting help preparing for things like Everest Base Camp or Kilimanjaro or Machu Picchu. Like, as you said, those bucket list adventures. And I'd been coaching for years and years. I'd done a reasonable amount of hiking in my life, a bit of trekking in my life. And I sort of just seen all these people coming in with these massive, like, adventure aspirations, and not only just having this big goal in their sights, but then they were just inspired to be going out hiking every weekend or two and just getting out there and really getting amongst it. I was like, you know what, this is something that I'm really, really enjoying. And on top of that, as I was diving into it, I sort of realized that the actual information available to these guys around physical preparation and dealing with high altitude and injury prevention, specifically for the trail, it was really, really poor quality. And if you've been anyone in the coaching world or the training world, for more or less every population, there's some pretty good quality content out there. So, weight loss, there's strength gain, there's people training for marathons or triathletes or anything like that. There's some really, really good information out there. But for whatever reason, the hiking, the trekking, the mountaineering world, it was just really, really, really poor. And there were so many people coming to me just sort of confused, like frustrated, even a bit anxious about these adventures, purely because they'd done a Google search, they'd been searching through it for hours and they couldn't find anything. And I sort of had the realization, like, look, beyond this just being a sort of part-time gig where I'm helping a few people here and there, I was like, you know what, this is an opportunity not only for me to do something that I'm really, really enjoying and can really make an impact, but actually make a genuine difference in the space and actually try to really make a proper change in the adventure community. So that's sort of where I've been at for the last probably the last 11 months since I've sort of made this my full-time gig and came out under the Summit Strength name as my own brand. And in all honesty, yeah, couldn't be happier with the choice I've made.
Now, getting back to that situation I was talking about today, where a couple of things might come up, I'm really interested to know who potentially were some of your first customers in this. If I mention the words house grub, does that ring a bell to you at all?
House grub?
Yeah.
Oof. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry.
Have you ever... Okay, let me try and refresh that a bit. Have you ever shared a house with some blokes that called you the house grub?
Oh, yeah. No, that does
now it rings a bell. Now it does ring a bell.
Different context. Yeah, it does ring a bell.
I've just got to say that you and I don't know each other. We've never communicated face-to-face prior to this podcast show today, right?
That's right.
So for me to throw out there the house grubs, that could be something that leads on to something else in this conversation. So were these the guys that you dragged in first to support your business? Were they some of your first clients, or how did you get your first clients on board?
Oh, those guys are all trainers, the guys that all call me the house grub. So we used to live together in a house in London, 4 out of 5 of us were personal trainers or strength conditioning coaches ourselves. So we always used to sit around and like throw out ideas of what else was going to be our $1 million idea, you know, what we were going to do in the space to make a genuine difference. And they've been really supportive of my business since it started, but they weren't the first. Definitely haven't trained them because they're pretty on top of their own stuff. Who was the first guys coming in was just some people. Before I sort of went out under the Summit Strength name, I've been putting just some information out on Instagram and Facebook and just putting content out there and sort of spreading my ideas a little bit before I even sort of had stepped out on my own. And just from that, some people had reached out to me from there and just saying, look, I'm preparing for, I think the first one was a bloke called Steve. And he's like, I'm preparing for Kilimanjaro coming up this November. He's still actually training with me right now. And he's like, look, I just need a bit of help. I don't really know what I'm doing. I've got X, Y, and Z problems. And we're like, you know what, let's go from there. And yeah, that's where the first few people came from, just pure the magic of social media.
Fantastic. Now, I guess back in these days in London with the boys in a house sharing together, I can imagine there was quite a bit of ranting going on. You were known as, or your ranting sessions were known as Rowan's rants, weren't they?
Yeah, they sure were. That used to be the probably semi-weekly, bi-weekly occurrence when I'd come home and we'd all gather around the kitchen table, which was absolutely tiny. And we didn't have a living room back then, so it was literally, that was our living space. And I would have something that fired me up, and I would go on a little bit of a rant. They'd all sit around and stir me up and egg me on and make me even more fired up. And then, yeah, that was it's good fun back in the day, and it still goes on a little bit.
Well, I hope that little interlude there has brought back some good memories for you with calling you those couple of things that were coming from those guys. So you can get back to them after the show and give them a hard time about it.
Yeah, I will do that.
Now, let's get back to talking about your business, because I think one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is that being an adventurous sort of guy myself and done a lot of across-the-world adventures on all sorts of different expeditions, I find it really fascinating to understand that I believe there's a lot of people out there doing this stuff that are not very well prepared. And I think somebody who's now taken up as a full-time onus to try and help people become more, I guess, efficient and effective in preparing for their big adventures, I think that's a great thing. So you refer to, or you have a paradigm, I guess, that relates to the 4 success factors within your business, which are expertise, training, accountability, and mindset. So I'd really like to go through these and talk about each one of these through your eyes and why you've set up your business with these areas of or these pillars of success, let's call them that, and what clients are really getting out of each one of those things that come and see you. So can we start talking about, say, expertise and what was lacking before? You already mentioned it. There's not a lot of stuff out there in the public domain. So what did you think you could bring from a level of expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the expertise was purely for the fact that, as I said, when I was looking at information for this population, 99% of it was written by hikers, trekkers, and mountaineers themselves, and not actually exercise professionals. And while they might sort of cover the very, very basics, all right, they might have a general understanding of exercise. Anyone who's in the fitness space will know that it's just like any skill. You might learn how to do something very, very basically within a few months, but to truly master this skill of like exercise prescription and training and all of the stuff that goes around that, it takes years and years and years. And I've been a trainer for 10 years now, and I'm still learning more or less every day. People have been in the space for 20, 30 years, and they're still constantly learning and growing. And just sort of looking from a trainer's perspective, seeing all this information like just put out by amateurs who probably didn't really know what they were talking about. And unfortunately, someone reading that doesn't know whether these people know what they're talking about or not. So I was sort of thought to myself, look, there really does need to be an expert and specialist viewpoint on this, who's actually giving out quality advice, which is coming from not only evidence-based stuff, so which is sort of research-backed and, you know, all more or less scientifically proven, but also from an experience-based stuff as well. So stuff as someone who's dealt with clients and knows the ins and outs of training for years and years, and seeing, you know, there's a few people in the world doing that in this space, but there's not very many people in the world sharing that information outside of their closed doors in the gym. So I thought, you know what, this is more or less up to me. So that's where the sort of expertise came out. And I was like, you know, I've got the background in coaching. I've been coaching for years. I've got the formal qualifications. You know, I've done a degree in sport and exercise science. I've got the sort of knowledge of what you need to be doing on the trail. And it all sort of came together. It was like, you know what, I'm probably the man to do this, in all honesty.
Okay, great. Now, for our listeners, are we talking about, I think one of the things that I want to be careful of today is that we actually clearly uh, talk about who this is targeted towards. So, if, for instance, I had a guest recently on the show who talked about doing the Camino Trail, and his preparation was next to nothing really in terms of getting into the deep dive of training and having a program. You know, he literally walked around the block, went down to the supermarket, and did all that sort of stuff. So, is your program designed for somebody who's taking on an adventure like the Camino Trail, or something a bit more serious where they're getting into high altitude mountaineering hiking?
The big answer to that, which you're going to hate, is it depends. So the Camino is something that a lot of people do step into when they haven't done much preparation, and luckily, like the way that it's built out, the way that it's structured, you can do that, and you can get fit on the trail. There's reasonably enough support and places where you can drop out if you have any issues. Mainly for the Camino, if someone did have a prior issue, so they had experience with knee pain or foot pain or had some particular issue, that's when they might be reaching out to me. But the majority of the people that I deal with is people for stuff that's maybe a half step more than the Camino. So things like, trekking in Nepal or Kilimanjaro or Kokoda or, and even if aside from those major adventures, I have quite a few people who purely just love their weekend hiking, but they just struggle with things like knee pain, or they struggle with, getting out of breath on hills. So there's a big scale of people that I work with, but yeah, it's mainly for the fact that if someone has a specific issue or a specific challenge ahead, that's when sort of I step into and I give them my support and guidance.
Okay, let's get on to point number 2 in your 4 success factors, and the second one is training. So, are we talking about a gym-based training program here that you put together for your clients? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different ways the training goes about. Like, as a general overview, I tend to find that most people preparing for these ventures seem to have a good idea of how to get walking fit, in the sense that they will usually be given a program from their trekking company, or they can download one on the internet, and they're like, look, I go out walking 2 or 3 times a week. Every single week it gets more and more and more. Every once in a while I might do a set of stair intervals or something like that. Most people tend to have a decent idea of what that is. So what I bring from my point of view is applying a whole bunch of different training around that. So things like structured strength training, which very few hikers apply, but is so beneficial for things like injury prevention and things like movement efficiency, and just making you like a lot more confident on your feet and moving. Yep. Things like specific conditioning training, so beyond just walking, actually doing specific types of intervals, whether it's timed out for certain energy systems, or whether it's specific to if you have to struggle up lots and lots of stairs, we might do some stair intervals, or if you always getting out of breath on a hill, we might do a particular type of interval, or actually putting a little bit of structure behind what they're doing there. And then other bits and pieces, things like, very, very few hikers in the world would ever consider doing a recovery session, which is very, very popular and, very, very essential in the strength conditioning world. And any sporting team or professional athlete will be doing them. But hikers tend to miss those little bits and pieces around structured training. So they'll skip their recovery, they won't do anything, and then eventually the body will start to get a little bit niggly, a little bit sore, and that's when people start getting into issues. So trying to apply a bit more of a holistic, structured program to someone's preparation, as opposed to just doing walking.
How do you find people taking up on this type of philosophy? I find what you're saying is very intriguing, and I think it's kind of going to the next level. But is the local mum and dad who are going to head off to do the Annapurna circuit, are they saying, hang on a minute, we've got to get better prepared for this, and coming to somebody like you? Or is it still difficult to convert that person into saying, well, hang on, you need to prepare better? How's it working out for you in that respect?
Yeah, at the moment, it's still a bit of a long-term battle to get the local mum and dad who don't have any issues, who are just heading over there and they just want to have this adventure. Most of the people that tend to reach out to me are the people who they've tried to do it by themselves, either this time or previously, and they've come into an issue and they realize they need help. So the most common thing for me is someone's gone out and they've trained for maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and then they start getting some serious knee pain when they're on the trail, and they're like, look, this isn't going away, I don't know how to deal with this. Or the same thing for foot pain. They're both super common on the trail, and that's usually the sticking point. And people are like, look, I actually need help because my trip's coming around soon, I don't know what to do, and I'm a little bit worried where I'm going to get around it. The times I can actually reach the local mum and dad a little bit more is like I've got a few partnerships with particular trekking companies, and if they can sort of get in the ear of their clients and just talk about the seriousness of preparation a little bit more, that's when I tend to get people coming in the first point. But probably 85% of people at the moment are just someone who's run into a particular roadblock and just realised they need help with it.
It's interesting you're talking about working in association with the trekking companies. Do you do anything like information nights through meetup groups or something like that, where you can bring a group of people in together and share that information in that kind of environment?
That type of stuff's in the work in progress at the moment. So the partnerships I have at the moment is purely they'll send people to me, I'll do assessments and give them a little bit of advice around their training, and if they happen to want to train with me, that's what we do. At the moment, we're sort of banging around ideas about exactly that, like whether we can do some webinars or some information nights or bits and pieces where we can just purely share a bit of information out. But it's still in the process of getting all hammered out and deciding what the best way of going about it. Because a lot of the people I'm with is their clientele is not just Sydney based, but they're all over Australia. So trying to get all over the world. So trying to get everyone in one place is easier said than done.
I can highly recommend setting up a podcast show to do this, because I think that would be another vehicle and tool for you to be able to use, but I'll leave that up to you to decide.
I've already got one, don't you worry.
You've already got one, okay, great. Okay, we've done the first two success factors in your business pillars. The third one is accountability. Tell us about what you mean by accountability.
So accountability is sometimes in the training world, it's sometimes just the missing element. Like some people know exactly what they need to do. They'll have the perfect program in the world. They'll know how to train. But if there's not someone looking over them or checking in with them, they just never do it. In my training life, like back in my previous lives, like I've had people who have been experienced trainers for years and years and years. They could write up the perfect program for themselves, but they literally just needed me waiting for them in the gym, or they would never come in and do the session. And the way my training works, whether it's online people who are all around the world or whether it's in-person people, just giving them that extra support. So giving a message here and there or an email here and there through the week, just to make sure things are happening. Coming up with little check-in systems, just so to make sure, they've always got that sort of thought in the back of their head. It's like, look, I can't just let myself down. I'm letting Rowan down if I don't do this. Sometimes just gives people a bit of the kick in the behind to actually make it happen. And as sad as it is, that is a really, really big portion of the training journey for so many people.
I guess it is indeed. Now the fourth item on the success factors is mindset. Might seem obvious, but talk us through what your version of looking at the mindset is all about.
Yeah, so there's a few different facets to this. Like in particular for the trail, we do a little bit of mindset training. We talk about things like affirmations on the trail or positive thinking or visualization and all these little mental techniques and mindset techniques which you can use while you're actually on the trail to make things, actually get through difficult situations, but also just make a day on the trail a little bit more enjoyable. So that's one facet of it. The other is more of an overarching concept of sort of getting in your head that a lot of the work you want to be doing is proactive around your preparation as opposed to reactive. So, what I mean by that is doing the training before you become into an issue. So whether you're doing your cardiovascular training before you're getting huffed and puffed on the trail, or injury prevention before things start to break down, and just trying to shift that way of thinking a little bit, just so. My big thing is trying to get people through their adventures, not only actually get through them, but actually get in a position where they can thoroughly enjoy every second of it. And just trying to, if we can shift the mindset early on beyond saying, hey, I just need to do the bare minimum to get myself through, to, hey, I'm going to be proactive, I'm going to tick off all my boxes, I'm going to be on point of this. And then they can head off and they can actually be, relatively comfortable while they're doing these things. This whole relative's obviously a strong word there. But yeah, just really be able to appreciate this sort of once in a lifetime experience as much as they really can.
For someone who's listening to the podcast today and they've got the Everest Base Camp hike as a bucket list item on their adventure list, what would you deem to be a relatively good preparation time period for somebody who wants to go off to do that particular hike, who's starting from a ground zero base at the moment?
I absolutely love 16 weeks for this, purely for the fact that you can get away with something like 12 weeks if you came in, you got a program, and you really worked hard for it that entire time. 16 weeks is what I like to work off with my clients, purely for the fact that over that time period, there's always going to be something that comes up. So whether you get sick, which is always going to happen for a week or two, whether you got holidays, whether you get stressed out, your work comes on, or you're just a bit demotivated, it just gives a little bit of buffer room and takes a little bit of the stress away from a little shorter time frame with people. Like I've worked with lots of clients in shorter time frames, and 9 times out of 10, something always happens, whether they get a little bit sick or they have work commitments or whatever, and it just adds so much stress to the final weeks of their preparation and worry and even anxiety, not only for them but for also their family, who's sort of concerned. They hear all these stories about people up at Everest Base Camp and they're just stressed out. And so if you can sort of extend it out to 16 weeks, that sort of takes a lot of that risk of stress out, and it just allows you to really tick off every single box you need to really get through it happily.
I get that, because being an ex-marathon runner, that 16 weeks was my program as well to head into a marathon. So it sounds to be fairly consistent with taking somebody's current physiological state and putting it into a state of preparation to be able to take on a task like that.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah. Now, I would like to recommend to you, you should have a 5th success factor, I reckon.
Okay, hit me.
And I think it should be reflection, because in talking to all of the guests that I have on this show and listening to their amazing travel stories, and a lot of the time's not taken to actually reflect upon the journey. And for me, listening to you, the journey actually begins when somebody contacts you and says, here, this is my bucket list experience and I want to do this. Because I think reflecting along the way, whether it be from the first week they connect with you and go through the 16-week program, whether they go off and do their adventure and tick that box, there's a whole lot of opportunity for milestones along the way where they can actually sit down and give gratitude to the people around them that are supporting them, but also secondly reflecting upon the journey and the strides that they've made. And I don't think, for one, as adventurers in the world, we actually take enough time out for that. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And that's actually something I've been considering and in the works a little bit at the moment. I'm sort of, for all my clients, I'm slowly building out a whole bunch of new training courses for them. So little things that go inside of the programming that can sort of expand their knowledge a little bit. And one that I'm in the process of coming up with now is quite similar. Sort of once you finish your adventure, how can you look back and sort of have a really, really good debrief of, what you've done, and not only like what's gone well, what's gone poorly, but what you can be satisfied with, what you can look back in like 10 years time, and how can you look back and really feel those emotions that, you've conquered a mountain, or you've done this thing you've been dreaming about for years, and you've had people support you all the way through, and you've seen these amazing positive experiences and met these amazing people. And yeah, I'm trying to pull together a little bit of an after adventure course for people just to go through and sort of reflect a little bit, because as you said, it's so easy to fall back into life again and just sort of miss out on that reflection period and that appreciation period. And yeah, it's a little bit sad when we just get sucked into life without fully taking in every little ounce of a adventure or a trip as we can.
That's great. Well, I'm going to make a statement online right here live to the whole audience and to yourself while we're talking about this, and I'm going to walk the talk, and I'm going to suggest to you that I'm going to offer the Global Travel Channel podcast show as an opportunity for those people that come into your business as a client and go off and head off to do their bucket list adventure, that they can actually come back and come on the show and talk about that whole experience. I'll offer that to you and your clients. So if that's something you would like to collaborate with me on, then that is definitely an offering I'd like to suggest, so people can actually reflect more upon the journey they've had with you and also the bucket list experience.
Yeah, fantastic. I will 100% take you up on that, because that's an amazing idea, and it's so great to get people the chance to talk about their stories. So yeah, 100% I'll take you up on that.
Okay, good. Now, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes people make before heading off on hiking holidays?
The number one absolute biggest mistake people make is, I think I mentioned it before, is just not being proactive about their injury prevention. So what I mean by that is a really, really common story that I see from people time and time and time again is they'll plan a hiking holiday or a trekking holiday, and they will start their walking training. So they'll go out walking 2 or 3 times a week. As I said, every week getting a little bit more. Around about the week 4-5 mark, they begin to notice there's, a few little niggles. So maybe like their feet start getting a bit sore, or the shins or the knees. And it's just a little bit, but it's not that big a deal. Around the week 6 or 7, it starts to get worse. And then around about the week 8, they're like, look, actually, this isn't going away, and this is really, really getting bad, and my adventure's away, 4, 5, 6 weeks away. And then they'll reach out to me, or you'll see them reaching out in a Facebook group just saying, hey, look, I've got this issue. What can I do to help? And I always say to people who reach out to me at this stage, look, we can do a little bit to minimize this potential pain that won't affect you on the trail, but it's probably a little bit too late to fix it in the time frame we have. But I always think to myself, look, if you've done just a few simple things in the beginning of your preparation, it doesn't have to be a huge amount, but just a few simple things, you could have avoided this whole issue altogether and eliminated, as we talked about before, that stress, that anxiety, just that issue of getting on the trail. So I always try to hammer home for people who at least following my content is just be proactive with your injury prevention. Just do a couple of strength exercises a week. That's literally all it takes. And it can be so beneficial to just minimizing that risk of injury and discomfort. And yeah, that's definitely the number one most common mistake I see.
So if someone's already injured, should they actually cancel their holiday, or in your eyes, or should they go ahead and try to manage it accordingly?
Purely depends on how bad it is. Like I'll always say, first point of call with any type of injury, go see a physio, get it diagnosed, and get that professional opinion. Like the longer that you wait to see a physio or a professional and get it sorted, the longer it's going to take to get better. Always it fires me up a little bit. I probably do go on a few rants about this with my friends when I go on a Facebook group, and there's so many hiking Facebook groups, and people are just asking for advice around plantar fasciitis or knee pain or something like that. And you're like, I try to say, look, just go see a physio, because the more you delay this and the more you're trying to get advice from people who don't really know what they're talking about, it's just going to be drawn out. And so if you can go see a physio early on, at least they can give you a really honest answer, and they can give you the things you need to be doing to, if not get 100% better, but at least minimize the issue as much as you can. In the very rare cases, they might advise against the trip, but that is relatively rare unless it's something like a broken ankle or something. But 100%, if you're struggling with something and you do have a trip coming around the corner, don't hesitate, book it in. It's the best money you're ever going to spend on a physio.
Well, I guess there's another aspect to this too, what we're talking about. If someone's going to head off overseas and they have a partial injury and they're putting themselves, I guess, at risk of not only their own well-being, but typically a lot of people hike in groups or as couples or whatever, so they're also going to have an impact on somebody else's holiday experience. And then there's the medical support aspect of it, and a lot of these hiking expeditions are in third world countries. They're in places where the medical support is not what we know it like here in Australia, as an example. So therefore, it could be the possibility that you are, come to a bad end in a country where accessibility to medical care is not the same as what you'd expect at home. Would that be another factor of also considering?
Yeah, 100%. And you've always got to be aware of exactly what the first aid and the medical facilities and opportunities are when you're overseas and on your adventures, because some places they're not too bad, and it's pretty easy to get a helicopter on your travel insurance out of certain places, but in other places you are so isolated and you really don't have much of an opportunity. So yeah, absolutely, if you have a pre-existing injury and you're not 100% sure about it, you really do need to consider those type of things very seriously.
So as part of your service, if someone comes in, and I'm using Everest Base Camp today as a hypothetical, if someone comes in and says, hey Rowan, I want you to get me in shape to go off and do Everest Base Camp, and then 6 weeks into the program with you, they pick up a bit of an injury, it gets a bit worse, and they head off, and you kind of got some doubts in your mind about their potential to be able to do it. Are you actually providing them with medical tips and support for along the way? Like, have you actually done some research on what medical facilities are available on the Everest Base Camp trek and where they could go, and providing that to your clients?
Actually, no. So that's not an area I've sort of dove down. Usually those bits and pieces will be pretty well covered by the trekking companies themselves.
Okay.
So as long as they're actually booked on a tour, usually they can get all that information. If they're going with their own guides, there's going to be a different situation there. They'd probably need to find a bit of information. But I've got a few contacts which, depending on particular trips, where if someone asks a question which I'm like, hey, actually, I don't actually know, and there's not someone that you can ask, I refer them onto there. So I've got a few good people in my corner who can help me out with those areas.
Okay, good. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I
No,
just
no.
wanted to know whether the cradle to the grave kind of experience is I shouldn't be using the grave. It's not a good analogy, but you know what I was talking about. Let's move on. From your experience, do you find people always think they're fitter than they actually are?
Um, Probably 75% of the time, I think. Like,
Mm.
I'm in the actual running battle with my girlfriend at the moment, because we're heading off to do the Kokoda Trail in November,
Mm.
and I'm training her, which is always a big mistake when you try to train your partner.
Have you done the Kokoda Trail before?
No, I haven't. I haven't. So
Okay.
this is first time, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
Mm.
But she is of the opinion that she's doing her training and everything, but she definitely does think she's a bit fitter than she is at the moment. And I'm trying to gently suggest that, this is a very, very serious adventure. I do this for a living. I know what's taken, and I've sent clients over there before, and trying to, ease, a little bit of persuasion in there, but sort of in the battle at the moment. So, and that's something I do quite a bit, at least online. At least the majority of the people who come see me or actually reach out to me, they've already made the decision that they're not quite fit enough and not quite ready. So I don't have to deal with that for my actual clients. But yeah, I would say the issue with that is so many people can get through these adventures, or do get through these adventures, and do absolutely zero training at all. And they will come back and they'll tell their families and friends, like, hey, it was easy, no dramas at all, you just turn up and walk. And that sort of gets spread around quite a bit, and people think, hey, it's not an issue completely at all. But these people have just purely been lucky. They haven't had any issues, they haven't had anything that come up, and they've just gotten through it. And
Yep.
so that's probably what puts most people's minds into the thoughts of, hey, I'm a lot fitter than I'm a lot fitter than I need to be. I'll be easy, I don't really need to train. And I think that's probably where it stems from.
Yeah, I understand. Now I'm interested. We are a travel show, so I'm interested to know, why have you chosen the Kokoda Trail as your next trip?
um I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I did, well, like, the original plan for that was I was going to put together I did put together a package of, I was going to train people, take them over to Kokoda and actually do the trail. And I chose Kokoda because I had a few people request it from my clients, and they were like, look, I would love to do the Kokoda Trail. If you ever took a trip over there, I would absolutely love it. And I was like, you know what? It's been on my list for years and years. It's probably about time to do it. And so you thought, why not? Let's not hesitate and just book it in.
Yep. Yeah, fantastic. That's great. Now, do you think anyone can go on a serious hiking holiday? Is it for everybody to be able to do that, or do you say that a lot of people head off regardless and are not prepared well enough, but they still get through it by, as you say, luck anyway? But do you think anybody could can anyone reach the top of Kilimanjaro in your eyes?
I think anyone can, if they do the right preparation and they're honest with where they're at. I've trained people all the way from 17 years of age up to, I think, 74 years of age, who've made up the top of Kili, and they've taken their preparation seriously. They've done the right things. We've identified what they need to work with, and they've head up. There are people, as I said, that go up there with absolutely no training, and it's just literally you leave it up to chance. You might make it, you might be super lucky, but then more than likely you won't. For whatever reason, you always hear the success stories of people who make it without anything, but then the people who fail, whether they get altitude sickness, hypothermia, they get bad knees or whatever, they tend to keep their stories a little bit closer to their chest and don't spread it around a bit. So you get a bit of a distorted opinion of what's going on over there. So I think everyone can do it. They just need to be doing the right things beforehand.
Something resonated with me that you wrote on your website about creating more capable trekkers. I like that, because I think it also comes down to that fact that if people are more capable, the likely chances that they have a better experience is going to be higher, right? So I think that's a really good aspect. I guess you're still dealing with human conditioning, though, and to try and make someone more capable can be the challenge, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And, you just need to give people the tools and the opportunity to grow and develop, and in all the areas that sort of within my package, my scope. And 9 times out of 10, if they do have something booked in, people are pretty motivated to grow and to learn and to suck as much out of that experience as they can. And the beautiful thing of that is, once they do get those capabilities of, they know how to, pack their bag, they know what they need to do to prepare for adventures, and they know how to do X, Y, and Z, then it sort of snowballs and ripples out to the rest of their life. And so many of my clients sort of, they've just booked on an adventure just because it's a birthday or a bucket list or something coming up like that. But then after their adventure, they're so much more happier to jump into a hiking adventure on the weekend in their local national park, or going on a kayaking adventure. And just those little things which might not have been part of their life before, now that they're feeling confident and capable and, happy with themselves, it just adds those little bits and pieces into your life, which can just, bring so much more adventure and almost joy into your life, which I absolutely love.
That's great. Now, you talked about something in that last paragraph about equipment and things, and I think that's a really important part to talk about, because you can do all you can as far as preparing people to get out there and be fit and to have the right cardiovascular capacity to be able to go and do some of these things. But if they go and put on the wrong pair of hiking shoes, or they put on a bag, ill-fitting backpack, then they're still going to have trouble. Yeah. So is there anything within your program that you talk about gear and advise people around that?
Yeah, the gear stuff's interesting, and it's such an important thing, and it's such a popular discussion online, which everyone absolutely loves to give their 2 cents on. I give in my program little bits and pieces of advice, so things around what can help with blister prevention, and what can help with preventing sore muscles, and how to use trekking poles, and how to pack your pack and things like that. And when it gets into the specifics of exactly what type of boots you should be wearing, and what type of merino wool you should be wearing, and all X, Y, and Z, I usually send them off to an adventure store and say, look, I'm the specialist in physical preparation and handing with attitude, and I can give you some decent advice around the gear, but if you want that top quality advice, go and see a specialist in the store. And they're like, avoid the online shopping, actually go in person, pick their brains. Most people love to talk about that in the shops, and you can really get a lot of quality information out of that. So that's usually what I direct people to.
Okay, cool. Now, you mentioned your oldest client's around 74 and your youngest is 17. What kind of split in gender are you seeing? Is it mainly males or females, or pretty even?
Pretty even. Probably maybe 60-40 females to men, but pretty even, to be honest.
Okay, cool. So getting back to, we talked about the biggest mistakes that people make. I guess in terms of accountability would be the biggest struggle you have, in terms of making sure people stay on track for that 16 weeks and follow through. Is that probably a right assessment of that?
Yeah, that's it. Like, it's a little bit easier with my in-person clients because I see them each week and touch base with them. And we tend to, the Sydney-based clients will go, I offer a once a month group hike, so we'll go out in the trail and we'll hike together. The accountability is a little bit easier on that. For my online and remote clients, I never actually see them face to face, so it's a little bit more difficult. I have the options. I always email them and text them, and we have the options of booking in a call every week, which is all designed around helping that accountability. But if people don't take advantage of that, then there's not a huge amount I can do. So I have had people in the past who, things have come up in their lives and they will just not do the training for 2 or 3 weeks, which isn't ideal. But seeing everyone's got an adventure booked in, at least they always come back eventually back into the fold, and they're like, oh, I haven't been around, sorry. And I'm like, okay, now it's time to get serious. Let's set out these goals. Let's set out this process. Let's make this happen, because we need to go full steam ahead. So, yeah, that's probably how we go about it in accountability wise.
I think a lot of it comes down to the individual, right? So a few weeks ago, I had a lady on the show. She's a South African woman who was actually the first to summit Manaslu in the Himalayas, and she's off over there again at the moment. And she was walking us through on the show her preparation that she actually does to get ready. But the thing that came across from her to me when she was talking to me about her preparation was she didn't overstate her own capabilities, and she was very much in control of her emotions when it comes to I'm going to progressively get higher and higher, and I'm going to reflect on that experience. I'm going to see if it's something that I want to continue to do as far as getting higher in altitude on the climbs that she was doing. And I was really respectful of that, because I think it was somebody that is completely in control of that emotional side of it, and they're not punching above their weight, to use an analogy in terms of that. Do you see people coming in with realistic expectations of what they can achieve, or is everybody kind of shooting for the stars?
For all the people that come to see me, everyone seems to have pretty realistic expectations, and I think it's just the type of people that my content and marketing attracts. But in the actual space, you do see so many people who are definitely shooting for the stars when they maybe should be shooting that high yet, and they might not have that background experience and X, Y, and Z. But at least in the mountaineering and the mountaineering community in itself, people are pretty quick to put people, I don't want to say back in their place because that's not the right term, but to realign those expectations, because seeing mountaineering is sort of, can be a life or death sport, and so many people in the mountaineering world know people who have died up there. Most people are pretty honest about getting, the newbies coming in, or the people who may not be thinking 100% clearly, and at least giving them realistic expectations. So at least the mountaineering community as a whole gets around that pretty well.
I'm interested to know from a person with your skill set and experience what you think of this whole commercialization of climbing Everest as an example, and the bottlenecks that we've seen this year, but also the danger that seems to be imminent with people who are not high altitude climbers with a lot of experience, who are basically putting lives at risk. What's your view on all this?
Yeah, it's such a complex situation, and the argument is that all the mountaineers going up there, they're like, I accept the risks. That's for me. I know I can potentially die going up there and all of that, but the big issue with that is it's not, as you mentioned before, it's not just you on the trips. It's it's the support crew, it's the Sherpas, it's the other climbers, and there's so many other escalating issues from people going up there. So purely from my professional standpoint, like seeing those people going up on, it's purely, there's literally trips being advertised saying you don't need to do much training, you don't need to have any experience, you just need to fork out this outrageous sum of money and we're going to get you up there. I think that's a really major issue. There are definitely, there's, who knows if things are ever going to change. Like, it's a tough game for the Nepalese government for so many different reasons. So hopefully we'll see a few better safeguards and maybe a bit more restrictions. But in all honesty, who knows what's going to change there.
So if someone contacted you and you didn't know them from a bar of soap, and they said, look, my ambition is to get to the top of Everest, I want you to train me to make it, and your assessment was this person wasn't capable of doing this in the interim, how would you approach that one?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Like, if it genuinely came out to that situation where I was like, look, not in a million years are you going to make it up there, it'll probably come down to a pretty realistic conversation with them and saying, like, the brutal honesty, which, not many people want to hear, but, it'd probably have to be said. And if worst case scenario, I doubt this would ever happen if after that conversation, but they were like, what, full steam ahead, it'll probably be part of my responsibility to at least communicate with the climbing company and just say, look, this is where we're at, this is where the client is, let's start a three-way conversation so we can all get on the same page here. But at least, that's never really come across me yet, and hopefully it will never will, but that would probably be the way that it would have to go, I assume.
Okay. Now, you said earlier that Summit's strength has been going for near on 3 years, is that right?
So I've been working with the population for about 3 years. Summit Strength as a whole, I've been doing that for about maybe 11 months now. So I was working for another gym for a little while, which was a great way to get into it. But in the end, I didn't really agree with the way they went about things. So that's when I was like, you know what? If they're not going to do it, then I better do it. So yeah, Summit Strength for about 11 months now. Okay,
good. So where would you like to see your business in 5 years from now? What's the kind of vision that you're going to be able to offer people?
Oh, the vision. Oh, okay. Big plans. But
share them. This is the place to put them out.
So in 9 years and 2 months, I want to be. The goal on the board is to be the recognised #1 expert in the entire world on physical preparation for trekking and mountaineering adventures. So that's 9.2 years away. So still a ways. In about 5 years' time, I would like to be expanded a little bit more and have a few staff working for me and expand into a few more mountain sports. So I tend to specialize mainly on the trekking side of things and do a little bit of mountaineering. So I'd love to get like a mountaineering specific coach under my banner who could deal with all of that. And then also break out into other types of mountain sports, which don't really get touched on. So things like, a climbing coach and maybe a ski mountaineering coach, and, expand in those other adventure sports is sort of the ideal. So at this stage, keep on growing, and then hopefully it'll all be running smoothly in 5 years' time.
Well, I hope our chat today on the podcast show is going to help with that, and at least put you in touch with some new customers who want to find out whether you can help them to achieve their bucket list goals. Before I let you go today, though, Rowan, I want to talk about some of your favourite travel trekking expeditions that you've done that you can pass on to my listeners as potential ones to add to their bucket list. So what are some of the treks that you've done that really are top of mind over the times that you've been doing hiking?
Probably one of my favourite ones was back when I was 18. I spent spent a few months traveling over in Brazil and just did a trek out of through the Amazon. Where was it? Out of Manaus, and I can't even, to the life of me, I couldn't remember where it actually went. But it was just such an amazing experience being in the middle of the Amazon that I read so much about, trekking through the genuine rainforest, like feeling in the middle of nowhere, seeing all these crazy animals and, you know, these outrageous trees that, you know, absolutely huge, very, very different to everything in Australia. For the life of me, I couldn't remember what the name was, you know, but that was amazing. And another one in back in Brazil as well, like my sort of number two was in national park, was at Chapada La Diamantina, which is in Bahia, which is absolutely beautiful. Again, I can't for the life of me remember the name, but it was a 4 or 5 day it was a 5-day trek and went through a few beautiful waterfalls, but there was just so much absolutely amazing hiking in that national park. And I would say anyone who's sort of considering a South American adventure to get over to Brazil and get into that national park, or the Amazon obviously, but you know, it's so beautiful over there.
Fantastic. It's a good one to mention, Brazil, because I think in terms of top of mind, a lot of people think of the Himalayas and all the possibilities there, but going to other parts of the world, there's so many amazing trekking opportunities all over the planet that I'm glad you bring up something different than the Himalayas today.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I could, because it already brings back fond memories just talking about it.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, it's been a real hoot to have you on the show today. We're going to wrap it up there, and I really want to thank you. Remember, everybody who's listening, it's called Summit Strengths, and my guest today has been Rowan Smith. Rowan's 11 months into his new business, and we wish him all the best, and we're going to keep him accountable because he's going to send some of his clients back onto the show to talk about or to reflect on their journey from the time they walked into Rowan's office and said, hey, train me for my bucket list adventure, right to the time that they've actually ticked that adventure off. So I look forward to the journey ahead with us, Rowan, on that side, and hoping that we can get a lot more people across the finish line of their bucket list adventures. So thanks for being on the show today.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a blast, so thank you.
Tremendous. And remember, AKA House Grub, you make sure you get back to those guys and give them a hard time.
Yeah, I will. Don't you worry.
Okay, Rowan, it's bye for now.
Bye.
There we go. Good guy, Rowan Smith, talking about making sure that we are all better prepared if we're going to take on a hiking or trekking holiday. So food for thought on that one. Some really great things there for us to think about before we next book our next hiking adventure. I'm going to put the link to Rowan's business in the description below so you can contact him and tell him you heard all about it on the Global Travel Channel podcast show. If you're after other podcast episodes from the Global Travel Channel, shoot on over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com, and counting this particular episode, you can download all the 49 others as well that we've now done and listen to them until your heart's content. Don't forget, if you don't only want to get them from our website, you can check us out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and a host of other platforms where our podcast exists. But you can find all those on our website. And don't forget about our Patreon page if you want to contribute. If you like the content we're producing, it is our full-time gig. So any contribution you can make on our Patreon page, also at globaltravelchannel.com, will be muchly appreciated. Okay, that's it for me for this episode. My name's Mark Philpott, and until next time, I wish you all bon voyage.